Okay, so I believe that in this video, Preach talks about Mythic Plus, and Mythic Plus is obviously something that I'm very interested in, specifically the new affix and all of that stuff. So let's see what Preach has to say, because he's been testing out Mythic Plus.
Last time I spoke on Dragonflight, I told you that Blizzard had asked me the ultimate question, what do you think? Are you going to come back? Is Dragonflight different enough? And I said to them, look, until we get into the raiding and get into the Mythic Plus, which is my bread and butter of World of Warcraft, there's no way I can say. And at the time, it wasn't out. But that time has passed. Raiding has been released. Mixed, positive-ish reviews for the early testing. And Mythic Plus is here, along with its new affix. And I've been playing it. So let's get into it. There has been an enormous post by Blizzard discussing Mythic Plus and the dramatic changes they are making to this system. All in all, they are trying to do a couple of things. They're trying to make it much friendlier for players who don't do it day in, day out and can access it. Certainly if you leave mid-season, you finished your raid, you finished your goals, whatever it might be, and you decide to play something else and then come back. Again, coming back to what we talked about in our last video, that more drop-in, drop-out philosophy that seems to be developing with Blizzard these days. And also, they want to make it a pure progression path. If you've paid attention to literally any of the top Mythic Pluses, several of which I've interviewed over the years and worked with, you will know that some of them detest raiding. They hate it. What they love is pushing high keys, going forward, but they get hamstrung by the loot system, preventing them from simply having raw item level available to them in order to compete with what the raiders are doing, who combine their raiding and Mythic Plus activities. And there is lots of the casual player base as well, who has no interest in joining ever-increasing organized raids where they need to be online at a certain time for several hours, multiple times a week, whatever the case may be, and enjoy jumping in with a group of friends on Discord, getting into a Mythic Plus for a few hours, and still pushing high keys, but not having to commit for that rigorous schedule that they like. But, again, hamstrung by loot. So, let's go through this post a little bit. I'll link the whole thing down below so you get an understanding of what's going on. Firstly, they're going to cycle all the dungeons. What they're going to do is have a pool of Mythic Plus dungeons, some from old expansions, some from the new expansion for Season 1, and when Season 2 rolls around, they're going to have a whole slew of new dungeons coming in to replace them, and then they're going to cycle that way through the expansion. Their reasoning behind this is actually something I really agree with. The problem people have with Mythic Plus, similar to like getting ahead of the curve and things like that, is that after the first few weeks, people, especially the sweaties, have really learned their routing.
This is actually a serious problem in Mythic Plus that I feel like does not receive enough attention, so it's a good thing that Blizzard is talking about it. The reason this particular problem does not receive enough attention is because only the tanks really have to worry about this. Let's be completely real. Only the tanks worry about the routes. Most of the DPS, they don't have to worry about. They're like, the tank's going to make the route. We just have to follow him. And the moment things go awry, they're going to be the first ones to go like, shitty tank doesn't know the route. And it's like, bro. And it's due to the fact that all of this stuff has already been made available in beta, what's going to happen is the routes are already going to be established by the time you start playing the game. So if you're a brand new tank just coming in, you're like, okay, let me learn my way through Mythic Plus. And it's like, what do you mean learn your way? What do you mean learn your way? Do you not know the route? You're like, dude, I've never done the dungeon. Look up the route. Just look up the route. Download the what was it? It was the add-on from, I forget which guild it was. It was something Mythic Dungeon Tools or something like that. Was it from Echo or from Liquid Mythic Dungeon Tools? One of the guilds made it, where basically you'd go ahead and you'd tag the mobs that you wanted to kill, and you'd kind of like set up your route, and you could bring up the map and know, okay, I'm supposed to go from here to here to here. And dude, it's just like, Jesus Christ. And there was no room. And here's the thing: if you ever tried deviating from the route, like, people would go insane. People would be like, what are you doing? Like, this is not supposed to be the way. I think we ran into a couple of problems. I don't know if Q is watching, but I seem to remember a couple of times that we went in with a couple of randos, and they were very confused because Q would come up with his own routes, And so people would be very confused as we'd be going through the dungeon.
They've been watching the Twitch streams, they've been watching the MDI players, they've been using Mythic Dungeon tools, which is a great, wonderful tool, but they know the routes. They know the exact way you should go. And if you jump in there and you're like, hey, I'm here, I'll kill whatever it is you pull, or perhaps you want to get into tanking, and you don't have that couple of weeks or even 3 weeks experience, you are considered to be massively behind. It's not something you can just make up. You have to get in there and you have to play. You have to understand how the mobs work. You can't just watch a video and understand the intricacies that are going on with these pulls, especially when some of the really good players are pulling way more enemies than you can handle. That's something you just can't get over. Now, that compounds over time, especially if the dungeons remain the same. There are some people who, by the time you get towards Season 3 or Season 4, who have done Plaguefall, for example, literally hundreds of times. They can do that dungeon like the back of their mind. They know exactly where to stand. They know exactly when they need to interrupt. They know exactly when they need to trap. They know all those things. And you come in there as a more casual player, and you look at that, and you're like, I've done this maybe 10, 12 times, and you're doing new things, especially when the meta changes, or the route adapts to a new seasonal affix, and you're just like, and you feel like a burden. You feel like a jackass. You feel like a complete piece of wank. And that's not fair. That's not cool, and Blizzard wants to mix that up. So by changing the dungeon pool every single time, that means people need to relearn, there'll be a hard reset, and they won't be relying on their seasonal affixes in order to change the routes, which is what Blizzard has traditionally done, right? We can all remember with infested mobs and...
What do you guys think here in chat? Does anybody here do Mythic Plus? Do you guys do Mythic Plus? Do you think that this is a good change? Because I think that this is a good change overall. It's like I would still like to have potentially more dungeons, but, you know, if we can't have more dungeons, and I understand why, because you want to have only a certain number of dungeons so that people only have to learn a certain amount of bosses and get better at them over a season. But I also expect that season to potentially, you know, to be refreshed a little bit more often than it was maybe in the Shadowlands. Because like in Shadowlands, we had the same dungeons for goddamn near a year, I think. It was friggin' insanity. All right. Thinking about coming back for the X-Pact after not playing BFA in Shadowlands? Interesting. What's getting you to think about that? I'm assuming it's probably the talent trees. Talent trees is what's getting a lot of people back. But yeah, that's the way that I feel about that.
Emissaries coming in is that it makes you go somewhat to the left, where you usually always go to the right. That's something that they do, but this time they're going to change the entire dungeon pool up and see what's going to happen. That is, of course, going to have the side effects of including some dungeons people dislike. People think it's a bad idea. We had the whole Grimrail Depot thing recently. That's going to be a problem as well. Let's move on to that other issue of loot. So they're going to make Mythic Plus comparable to Mythic raiding. There's some really big misinformation flying around here, especially because the new raid is going to have some really high item level items in there, and that's really skewing what the mixed information, I would say, people are displaying about the Mythic Plus system. In the new raid, they're going to have more segmented tiers of loot. In fact, it's going to be split into 3 this time. Usually it's like half, or towards the latter end, they increase the loot levels. Now they're going to have it in 3 distinct tiers. Like, first couple of bosses are going to be a certain item level. I think it's the first 3. Then the next 3 slightly higher, and then the final 3 even higher again. But one thing they changed during the Shadowlands is that there was some items in the raids that were so obscenely powerful that the item level did not reflect how powerful they were. And it was weird. We had things like the Sylvanas Dagger, the Holy Priest Ring that came from Anduin. These things are so stupidly powerful that their item level makes no sense. So they're a lower item level thing. The new raid comes out like Sepulchre, and people are absolutely still using those items because they're just stupidly good because of the proc or the boost they have. They like items like that. Blizzard likes doing that, and this time around in the new raids, they're going to be including very, very unique items that have the item level reflecting how powerful these items are. One of these things is a bow that comes from the final boss, and this has a 430 item level over the 421 item level that you'll see in a lot of the instances of the raid. Now, that is an anomaly. That is pushing the item level roof higher in a very, very niche specific case. It does not represent the actual overall item levels that are available from the gear in the Mythic raid. So what they're doing with Mythic Plus is allowing the loot at the end of the dungeon to increase all the way to plus 20, and allowing Valor upgrades to go all the way up to 421. This means that Mythic Pluses, pure Mythic Pluses, are going to be able to obtain Mythic quality gear from just doing Mythic Plus. They're going to be able to focus on that entirely. Now, this is a bit pie in the sky.
This is good
I'm
news
no
for
idiot.
Q.
I've played this game forever. There is definitely going to be that hunter bow. Hunters are going to want to get it. There's going to be some trinkets. We've seen a few of them already that are already going to be super good, and Mythic Pluses who are deadly serious are going to want to do raiding as well. That's not new. I actually don't hate that. I think that's part of the game. If you want the absolute creme de la creme of every scrap of item equipped to your character, you're probably going to have to seek out multiple sources. But for the overwhelming majority of people who just enjoy doing Mythic Plus, now have a fully engaging experience going all the way through Mythic Plus and obtaining Mythic Raid quality gear by doing so. There are again more side effects. Raiders, yes, you're probably going to do your plus 20s now over your plus 15s. That's what's going to happen. It's a similar thing. If you are extremely invested, extremely serious, and want your character to be the absolute cream of it can be, the absolute best it can be, you're probably going to want to be doing that on a weekly basis in order to get those high vault rewards. For everybody else, though, this is going to be a problem that people bitch about because item level matters a hell of a lot to a lot of people. I don't sit in that camp. I never have. It doesn't matter to me. You're getting literally mythic quality gear from just doing this thing. The idea of doing a plus 20, and Blizzard are increasing the difficulty of Mythic Plus. They're going to scale it up even faster past Mythic Plus 11 in order to reflect the fact that mythic quality gear comes from here, but it gives people a goal. Overall, I like this change. This does provide more gear. The Valor cap is going up for a lot of people in the game. It might seem obnoxious at first, but in fact, overall, this is a really positive change and allows the people who really don't care for raiding to have a really good substantial goal to aim for in the content they enjoy. I think the people who are not going to like this are the people who like doing a bit of heroic raiding and like doing like a Mythic plus 10. That's kind of where their limit is, either via time or skill or ability or social circles. And they're going to feel like, oh god, now I need to do a plus 20. Yes, but that's also going to include you increasing those other elements of your game that aren't strictly feature focused, that are more about increasing your friends pool, joining in some Mythic Plus discords, getting to know people, improving yourself.
Social skills.
Those kind of things are what reflect in people being able to pug 20s eventually. But, of course, in Shadowlands, you are getting Curse seasonal affixes, and have been for a while now. Let's talk about the new affix, Thundering. So I've only done 4 Mythic Pluses on the beta right now, and that's not because of lack of testing or lack of interest. It's simply because there's only 2 dungeons available to Mythic Plus, which are the Azure Vault and the Ruby Life Pools, 2 of the brand new Dragonflight dungeons. And in there, they're basically not testing the dungeons themselves, because some of the bosses don't have their mythic mechanics enabled, or at least it didn't look like to us. They swung wildly from very, very hard bosses to bosses that just felt like heroic. But they're really just trying to get an idea of this new seasonal affix. There's a very long portion of the blog post about seasonal affixes, what they want them to do, what their intention is with it, all that kind of stuff. Now, Thundering has had a very, very, very negative response from the community. They hate it. They detest it. It's too much. And there's some... I'll play devil's advocate here. There are some very, very poorly clipped Twitch clips going around of Thundering that make it look considerably worse than what it actually is. That's not fair either. If you're going to talk about this and give Blizzard feedback, posting clips like that is not good. They can easily see, it's like, well, that's just not how this plays out. Like, it's sure to the general player base who isn't trying this thing, this looks like nightmare fuel, but it's not accurate as to how it plays out. Let's talk about Thundering then. So, Thundering, I had that same initial reaction. Don't get me wrong, I'm not downplaying how annoying and frustrating this thing is. I'm not saying it's good. Let's be clear on that. I am not saying this thing is good. It is not good. But it's also bad for other reasons than just what it does. It's not overly punishing. So what happens is you simply get an AoE circle around you. We've all seen them a million times. You'll have 5 orbs that shoot out, similar to the prideful mobs that you saw throughout Shadowlands. And then these orbs also stun you for a couple of seconds if they hit you. So the general idea is the group will spread out. You can't stand on top of each other because you all blow each other up. And don't get hit by the orbs. So very, very similar to Prideful is lining it up, but this time it's the entire group doing it. Alright, that's the mechanic. What's the benefit of this mechanic? This Kiss Curse idea, which is, if you're not sure what Kiss Curse is, it means it does something bad, like the mechanic I just described to you, but it also gives you a benefit. So in Shadowlands you have things like getting Torghast powers and killing certain mobs to gain certain buffs, things like that. There isn't one. There isn't one. In fact, Blizzard wants to shake this system up a little bit. They worry that by providing these extra powers, it kind of negates how good you need to be in the dungeon, and therefore you may access higher level gear than what you probably should. This comes back to my old adage with Blizzard. I don't know why you care if people are having a good time, getting strong buffs, and killing nice high keys, and feeling good about themselves. That seems fine to me. That seems all right in my book. That's not a big deal to me. But they're going to shake it up. They're not saying they're not going to do that system, but they want to taper it. So they said, like, if they do put buffs in there, they may also empower enemies in the dungeon to offset the fact that you're now very powerful. So they put some extra roadblocks in your way. Fun is a big word that needs to come into a lot of these discussions. Fun, fun, fun. What is fun about this? When it comes to thundering, there is nothing fun about this. It's just the problem. It's got two problems in my eyes. One, it's really boring. It's really boring. Okay. That goes against the fun idea. It's just a third affix. That's all I saw. It's just another affix that might as well just exist on keys, and that's it. So you now essentially just do Mythic Plus with 3 affixes instead of 2 once you reach that level, or 4, because you would have, of course, Fortified and Tyrannical included in that, which are staying around. Infest and Spiteful have gone away. Infest and Empowered, something like that, have been... Not Infest, Necrotic. Necrotic and something else have gone away. They're retiring them for the moment. That doesn't mean they're gone forever, but they're retiring them for the moment. So it's just a third affix. It's not as bad as it looks. It really isn't. It's not as bad as it looks. Like many affixes in Mythic Plus, it's bad when it happens at the wrong time. That's the problem with it. So we fully juiced our keys up. There may be plus 10s that you're...
See, the problem there is, like, it's not as bad as it looks. The problem is the RNG nature of it, I think, is probably why people are so upset. But I haven't played with the affix. I understand what the affix does, and I can see it being very annoying if you are playing with randoms, which is why I feel like for Preach, he's going to be like, well, it's not that annoying because probably playing... Then again, I don't know if he's playing with a group of premates or not, but traditionally, from my understanding, is that Preach most of the time plays with people that he knows. So, yeah. Oh, what the crap? I'm covered in Vespoids. I'm about to die. But yeah, it's one of those things that's going to bother you more or less depending on whether you are playing with people or not. Bro, this is really bad. I'm going to die. I don't know how to fix this.
But we're doing them with proper affixes. We're mixing in Volcanic, Raging, all those kind of things. A lot of the keys that I saw being done on Twitch were done basically affixless. People testing the bosses on Tyrannical, or just having a run through the higher keys to see how the mobs felt and things like that. We put the proper experience on. I think that's the best way to test how these keys work. There are obviously several streamers who are also doing the same thing. And I will say that, like, when we mixed in Quaking, Ruby Life Pools was really bad. I did a couple of dungeons off stream, but the 2 I did on stream, Ruby Life Pools with Quaking and Thundering, and I can't remember what else we had in there. It might have been Bolstering and Fortified, created some really hellacious moments. There's just far too many ground effects going on at the same time that are overlapping, and you simply can't see them all. It actually reminded me very much of an FF14 raid when WoW players watch it and they're like, it just looks like a light show. With all these combinations of things, and this is exactly why the Twitch clips have been taken as a negative, it just looks insane.
Do not misinterpret Preach. He's saying it looks like one, but it doesn't mean that the 14 ones play like that. It just looks like that because it's supposed to look overwhelming.
There's, especially if you've got a dungeon like Ruby Life Pools, which has an enormous amount of ground effects in and of itself. Before you start adding Mythic Plus affixes, there's tons and tons and tons of ground effects. That place is burning to death constantly. Certainly the second boss, which is a very easy boss, but we actually wiped several times on this boss. One reason was because we didn't know the boss yet, so we had to learn it. But the second reason was the combination of affixes that can occur during this boss are so egregious that it made the boss infinitely harder. And everybody agreed, like, if we had slightly different affixes, this boss wouldn't be an issue, which is kind of what the affixes are supposed to do. I don't see that as a super negative, but it definitely made it considerably harder to the point where I'm not doing that dungeon during that week of stuff. And that's what they need to be careful of. If you add in more and more ground effects, they just start overlapping. and you just have a floor that's full of stuff, and some effects are brighter than others, so you can't see the other effect that's going on underneath you. And this is where more weak auras come in to try and indicate what's going on, and it leads to a self-fulfilling prophecy. Why we're having so many ground effects all the time isn't fun. It takes away the fun effects of it. So that's its two big issues right there. It's one, it's not fun, and two, it really clutters up your screen in an obnoxious way. And it doesn't need to be that way. So that's my feedback on Thundering. This does need some iteration. I would much rather it do so. I've seen so many really good suggestions for this thing. Really good. Such as linking players or gaining some sort of benefit by intentionally avoiding the orb shooting out. Reduce the orbs to 3. It was already kind of bad enough with Prideful when one player had 4 things shooting out. Now you've got 5 players shooting like 5 things out. It's a lot of orbs combined with everything else that's going on with little to no benefit. Where
makes me wonder, considering how much the players are complaining about it, did the developers test this out? Like, were they able to do it themselves? Because unfortunately, that is the reality of things. A lot of times developers will implement something into World of Warcraft that they're like, oh, this is going to be cool. But they can't actually do it themselves. I wonder if that's the case here with this one.
At least killing the Prideful enemy gave you a juicy buff to go along with it. It feels like it's just swung too much in one direction. So maybe linking players together some way so that the thundering effect... And also, it doesn't really look like thunder. Some really good ideas that I saw came from the fact that why isn't lightning shooting down and stuff? This is just blue orbs. It looks like a normal mechanic. Again, coming back to the idea that this is just the third affix, that's all it is right now. And it could really do with some flavor to mix it up, to make it something people aren't just like, this is just irritating. I don't want to go back to the days of Infest, where it was just, you know, we had to pre-scout the dungeons to see where the infested mobs were, and things like that. Overall, though, coming back to the dungeons, they're really cool. One of the things I spoke to Blizzard about was that they were asking me about the dungeons specifically. Like, what do you think about new dungeons? I was like, Heroic doesn't show anything. Heroic is just too easy. That's the problem. Like, everything, it's designed to be cleared by simply everybody. That's fine. That's where its place is in the dungeon pool, as Heroic, is early gearing. You're supposed to go in there and low gear and kind of smash everything to pieces. In this...
Like, actually, why do we need normal and heroic? Well, I guess heroic, like, all of them are maxed level, but... kind of feel like dungeons should just be heroic by default. I feel like World of Warcraft suffers from having too many difficulties. I don't know. It's weird.
So we had some very difficult encounters. Some very easy, as I said, some mechanics are missing. So we kind of maybe wiped 3 times on one boss and then never got hurt by the second boss. Things like that occurred in our runs regularly. They were very normal approaches. But overall, this was a good feel. I particularly like, certainly in the Azure Vault, the addition of little stealth gauntlets, things like that we've seen in a few dungeons. Nothing as obnoxious as throwing the eyeball around in the, I think it was the BFA dungeon, where you had to pass the basketball around the room with the mobs chasing you and they stole your ball and went back, and having to come up with some really efficient manner of doing it. Nothing that obnoxious, but little gauntlets that you need to run through to make sure everything's going right, and if someone screws up, it's a problem, and paying attention to screeching mobs, things like that that give you a little bit more attention and focus on what's going on in the dungeon, gets you invested in what you're doing. You're not just AoEing trash down all the time. So that's my thoughts on Mythic Plus so far. I will go back to this when more dungeons are released, and we hopefully get a new iteration of Thundering that makes it interesting. That's my main goal here. I would like Thundering to be interesting. Right now, it might as well be fancy quaking. That's kind of it. So you get quaking, volcanic on top of Thundering, and then you have fire effects on the floor as well. It's like, not too fun, Blizz. Not too fun. All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again. Bye-bye.
I think there's also a problem here where players are potentially getting too good at the game. The problem is that it's going to be such a small subset of players, but they are so good at the game when compared to other people. And that becomes a problem. Like, if you guys remember, a lot of people who would play the original Dark Souls, right? And then they'd go and play Dark Souls 2 and it'd be like, oh, Dark Souls 2 is easier, stuff like that. And, you know, same thing, then you go into another Souls-like, and it's like, oh, this one's easier, and this one's easier, and this one's easier. Because it's not that the games are getting easier, it's just that the players are getting better. By the way, guys, as per usual, go check out the video, give it some watch time, hit it up with a like and all that stuff. We love Preach. Preach is awesome. But yeah, it's just like I just feel like a lot of the times it's not necessarily a game thing. It's just more, you know, we're just getting better. And the problem then is, what about the players who aren't better, right? Players who haven't gotten better, or new players that are coming into the game. And even for the players that have gotten better, they go in there, like Preach even says, it's like, well, this is not fun. Like, look at all this bullshit that's happening in this dungeon. This is just, like, not a good time. And that's something that is also important, right? It's not just about it being challenging. It needs to be a fun challenge.